Welcome to the STARS program, seniors taking active roles in society. And now, here's your host, Anita Finley.
Many of you remember we had a very, very exciting book that we talked about. As a matter of fact, it was in our July, it was Book of the Month for July. It's called The Silence. But I haven't been very silent about it, though, I have to tell you, even though that's the name of it. And, of course, the author is Monty Helfgott. And Monty has some other ones already done. I haven't read them yet, but I do plan to. But, Monty, I'm glad that you're here.
Thank you.
And I'm glad, actually, we'll get into your book then. I'm glad that you brought a guest with you, REBECCA Barber, because in our interview, you did talk about where you're going with all this and what you're doing to help other people. So let's just get back to this. Since the time we talked, has anything exciting happened to you with the book?
Well, I've gotten a lot of inquiries as to where to purchase it, and I've gotten a few other reviews that were done by nationally known organizations. One is called Reader's Favorite, and they reviewed the third part called Book 3 of my trilogy. Originally, we just talked the last time on the radio about Book 1 with John Mackenzie. But all three, Book 2 and 3, are available now on Barnes & Noble as well as Amazon.
Right. And I said to you that I love the way you interpret. I always call him Mackenzie. I don't say John because I love his name. Probably should have been Mackenzie.
It's the way that rolls off your tongue, Mackenzie.
Yeah, right.
It's a perfect name for an action
sexy. I can see him.
James Bond, Indiana Jones.
Yeah, I just love it. I was so excited when you started describing, when I read your book and we decided that you would start doing some interviews. I wanted to go back, though, now that you brought up number 3, The Reader's Favorite. They did quite a job. I was interested in reading that because it looks like there's a lot more. Like number 1 was kind of play games. Is that true?
Play games.
I mean, it wasn't as... I thought it was great, but number 3 sounds like it's really moving forward.
Number 3, I'll tell you, number 3, or Book 3, was the most difficult book for me to write. I think it took me 2 years to write it, rewrite it, and then finally I was satisfied with its final form. But the thing about Book 3 is that it connects Book 1 and Book 2. Now, that sounds strange because there's a lot of time travel in this. So we start off with Book 1, which starts in the late 1970s, and then Book 2 goes back to the 1900s, and then Book 3 goes from about 1920 to about 1940. And it's the Book 3 that connects all of the characters. And you find out a lot of things that were perhaps a little fuzzy in Book 1 that you didn't understand, but Book 3 clarifies it all.
That's great. I'm very anxious. Well, I'm going to read 2 first, though, before I read 3, right?
Read 2 first, absolutely.
Go crazy. Well, this is what I'm thinking about. So, at your computer, do you have yellow stickies everywhere for you to keep up? How do you keep everything straight?
Actually, it's the computer that holds everything together. But you have to. It was very difficult because you're traveling back and forth in time. So you have to remember what one character said and did and the connections among all of them. I really didn't use stickies, but everything was put, on the computer. And then I had editors and people that helped me to organize it. If they said this doesn't make sense, I had to change it, things of that nature. I also had a mentor, a long-distance mentor that worked with me for about 3 years, and she was in Philadelphia. And her name is, I put a dedication in there.
Is that
to
Laurel?
Laurel Marshfield, who was absolutely phenomenal. And she got me through some very difficult times when I had reader's block, and she made some great suggestions to keep the main character, John Mackenzie, to flow through Book 2 and Book 3 through the idea of time travel, who looked over this man who was a descendant. Okay, so John Mackenzie could look back at his father and his grandfather. So they kept it in that with that, I don't know, you could call it a trick or a literary way of making it more plausible.
Well, your lovely wife is here in the studio, and I'm not going to ask her, but I'm asking you. Did you spend a lot of time with her while you were doing this, or I'll bet she had to kind of sit in the background?
Absolutely. She was cloistered, basically, and I would go into my writing room and go into my writing hole, and as most writers know, I would start at, let's say, 8 a.m., and before you know it, it's 8 p.m., and I didn't even realize it. And then I would come upstairs and say, well, we had dinner already, like that. So I have a great amount of affection and gratitude toward Ingrid, who tolerated me for this 6-year odyssey that I went through with my characters. And I call Ingrid the wind beneath my sails and the steady rudder of my life.
I love that. That is so sweet. But let's go into the paranormal.
The paranormal, yes.
That's really very interesting for you. Now, have you ever been a person like that? Well, you're in your youth, did you think that way?
Well, the only thing that I thought of, when I was very much interested in UFOs when I was younger, and they had this book called the Blue Book about the crash of the flying saucer and sightings of UFOs. But beyond that, that stopped. But for many years, I was involved in empirical research, doing my doctoral degree and doing other research in the field of the social sciences. So I really never had that involvement. But as I grew older, something, I don't know, began to make more sense or began to click that there were possibilities of other dimensions and other possibilities. And I believe I mentioned some of them, that after I finished my 3 books, I went on an odyssey to retrace the steps of John Mackenzie. And so we went to Germany, to France, to Poland, to the Ukraine, and to Israel. And during those times when I journeyed, it was with Ingrid, there were some strange coincidence. You can call them coincidences, but how could that be that, for example, an item that was in my book called John Mackenzie found in a museum a robe written by the Essenes, this splinter group that wrote the Dead Sea Scrolls. Okay, I wrote that. That was interesting. Then I go to Israel and I find out that what was found in a cave, it wasn't a robe, but it was sandals and a few other garments. I said, wow, what a coincidence. So that was of great interest to me. I'll just give you one other example, and that was in my book. I talk about the son of the high priest who actually rebels against his father, who was in charge of the Jerusalem temple, and goes to join the Essenes, okay? And I just made that up. And then when I was in Israel, I go to the city of David where they're excavating, and in the one of the tombs, they find a sarcophagus, a coffin, and chiseled into the coffin is the words, son of the high priest. Okay, now the real kicker in this is that when the archaeologists opened the sarcophagus, there was no body, which means that perhaps he did leave the high temple and join the Essenes, and that the Essenes are a group that supposedly some of the followers of Jesus were involved with. So that to me was a little shocking and a little I really found how could that possibly be? So are there some psychic things that have happened to me, including the time when I did visit a psychic who held my books and said to me, how did you write these books? I said, well, I'm not exactly. I did my research. I did my computer research. I spoke to people, and she would constantly rubbing her palms over various chapters. And she said to me, you were guided. And I said, what do you mean I was guided? She said, you were guided by a spirit from the past. That's all I'll say about that. So there's a lot of mystery in that occurred with me with my paranormal historical thrillers.
I'm just, my mouth's open, and I'm not saying anything because I'm listening, but I want to just tell everybody, I want them to know how this has all come about. Monty Helfgott wrote a book that I have in my hand called The Silence, and now there's Silence 2 and there's a Silence 3. I really urge you to buy his books. If you buy one, you'll buy the others, because it's a fascinating read, and you can see that the author is so into this, which is so nice. And so I'm going to give you can go to Amazon.com.
Go to
Correct?
Amazon.com.
That's the
You can
easiest
get it
way.
on ebooks or in a printed version, any 3 of them.
And I just love his covers, and I told him that when I first saw it. The other covers too. I'd love some jewelry like that. It's so beautiful, but it is very, very exciting. So, let's get into something else. So now you have this great skill, and as you, of course, were a professional, sharing it with all your, you were a clinical psychologist, and so you like to help people. And now you came up with a great idea that you shared with us. Why don't you talk about it, and then we can introduce Rebecca, who you brought along.
Okay. Just before I introduce REBECCA BARBER, I've always also been interested in history, capturing history. It was always fascinating. And you'll see in my books, it's also historical novels. The idea of allowing people to capture their history for posterity was very meaningful to me, so that their lives, their insights, their knowledge can be passed on to their descendants. So being a writer, being a psychologist, I decided that when I retire and come down to Florida, I am going to start a memoir writers club, and connected to it will be an interview studio. So people can write their memoirs under my tutelage, and if they want, they can also be videotaped and have a DVD to go along with their books. And as I worked to let people know in the Valencia Point community that this is going to be available, the Memoir Writers Club, starting in the fall, Rebecca contacted me, as have several other people. In fact, we've got 20 people signed up for this group. And I began to speak with Rebecca, and she told me about a fascinating story that she has, and a phenomenal historical trip that she took just this last June. And this is a story that needs to be told in many ways. And in one way, we are here speaking with ANITA Finley to start this going. So, REBECCA BARBER, I'm going to turn the mic over to you.
Yes, and that's true. And Rebecca was here as your guest, but I listened for just a few minutes, and my mouth was open also. I don't think I've heard about a story like this. This is so exciting that we are going to then do our very own interview with REBECCA BARBER. Now, before we do any of that, though, Rebecca, so had you ever thought that you would do this? I mean, I see you have a book, but before that, did you ever think that you were going to do any kind of a memoir on anything before you knew what your mother really did?
Oh, before I knew what my mother did, absolutely not.
You were just lived a good life. That's it.
Right. That's right.
And so you weren't really prepared for this.
I knew that the diaries existed once my mother passed in 1981. But I sat on them for almost 10 years, petrified, to find out who this woman, whom I knew as dynamic, as resourceful, as an inventive woman, who she really was. I was afraid.
You were afraid.
Mm-hmm.
And you don't seem you seem fearless, actually, but I can understand
Thank you.
that. So let me ask you about your children. Are they as excited about this? And
I think it will take some time until they realize the import of this. My oldest son, who knew my mother, has followed along as the book and the diary and the voyage have progressed. So I think, yes, it will have tremendous import to my children and their children.
So we're going to hear from REBECCA BARBER, right, in another interview, but I want to go back to Monty because, Monty, do you realize what you started here? This is pretty, I mean, you're going to be like the guru there.
Well, it's kind of like a chain reaction, and to me, I can say it warms my heart to know that people can write their memoirs and perhaps expose something that they have kept secret for many years. And this is not the only time I've heard of other people who have had similar experiences. So I feel sort of like a catalyst to help people to get their story out in many different ways and pass it on to descendants.
One of my issues was that to unravel the experience that I had this past summer with the original diary that was found, written in German, I might add, it fell into my lap. When Monty came, all the bells started to ring in my head. He's my conduit. He will be my mentor.
He's the bell ringer.
It will get done now.
Yeah, I can see how that is. And, you know, there's a lot more to come. If all these people who have signed up, little do you know what you're going to be. I don't think you're retired anymore, frankly. I think that's a gone thing. And your poor wife now, she's got another thing, right? What did she have a memoir in her?
She does, and maybe it'll come out one day. She has her own story.
See?
But being a workaholic all my life, I needed something to really attach myself to. And it's sort of like a culmination of so many things that I've done throughout my life, whether it's history and writing, psychology, video production, all of it is coming together right now. So I'm very happy.
Yeah, I can see that where you will be. And so you live in a community where this is now one of the activities.
That's right. It's called the Valencia Point, and my group will be the Valencia Point Memoir Writers Club. And everyone gets a pen with that.
It sounds like, you've heard of movies where there's a club. They've come down here to South Florida and they've made a movie with all this. This sounds like maybe that movie's going to go quicker than The Silence, because The Silence is going to take a big production. We're here at the Memoir Club. They just come, they sit there, and everybody's fun and they have a good time. I mean, I'm just, I am so glad that I talked to you first and that you decided to let us review your book, because, it's a very big thing for somebody to, and you may not feel that way because you're a professional. When I've done book reviews, a lot of people are very afraid to come on the radio. You hear they've written this great book, but that's been solitary. Now they have to come on the radio and share it. And sometimes some of the people, some of the books are very deep. It brings up a lot of scary things for them. And but it's really, and you've been in this psychological business in a sense. And
it can be very scary, but within the literary field, writing the book is only part one. It's the publicity and promotion that is needed to really get it out there if someone wants. And my dream is that it turns into a movie, because I want to sit on the set as a consultant. And all around the world.
And I felt that it has that kind of possibility. So you'll have to see. And who knows who's in your group, who might even be a retired film producer or somebody. But I do want to compliment you. We have all the books that we promote. We have an expo, as you know. We put 6 of them in for the 6 months because we have 2 expos. You were the first person that actually brought an entire setup. You stood there at the expo. I was so proud of you. I mean, everybody was coming there, and I've said, now, when someone wants to be there, I've got to really teach them how to do what you did, because I know you sold some books.
Right.
And you did a great job for us, and I want to thank you.
It's a little bit of the actor in me, the promoter. It's fun. It's exciting, and I love doing it.
Well, so now thinking about what you're going to be doing, hopefully there'll be more people, of course, like Rebecca, which it's going to be hard because this is rare. But now it's going to be your responsibility in a way to help them write the book. Absolutely.
And helping people write their book is not only the nuts and bolts of writing, but there's a very emotional level in the writing of memoirs. And you have to be careful of this, because people can get very upset because things do come up. And people cry, and one of my rules is whatever is said in the place where we're going to be doing the writing stays there. It cannot be said outside. There cannot be gossip. So, background in psychology and writing, I think I've got the right formula to help move people along and make them feel good about their history.
Anita, when you talk about emotionality, I have to say that with recent happenings, specifically in Charlottesville, it set me back so emotionally when I've been saying never again, and I'm sitting on my mother's survival book. This was her as a 19-year-old surviving. I realize how timely it is to get her story and my story out to the general public to remind us never again.
Funny you should say that. My sentence, my first paragraph in my sentence of the publisher's letter, I said, that was exactly what I said. I said, we have to remember what Israel said, never again, because it was Israel, I believe, who said that. I thought that's why. Anyway, I said the same thing because what we saw, and I'm not going to get political right now. It's not political. It's just terrible, terrible stuff that we just saw. And I know that a lot of people like you, like your mother, like other family members, and people who are living today who were in the Holocaust, that must have been terrible for them, more than it was for just the general public, which I felt. So getting off that, though, let me go back to what you were saying. So are you saying that the people in there will be talking about their memoir to everyone? So this is not just a private session.
Well, they'll be talking to other members of the writing group, but hopefully not exposing any very deep and emotional content to people outside of the group.
But even in the group, it's still, that'll still be okay? That
would be okay under my guidance.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, you're attacking. Is there anything like this anywhere else in any of the condominium communities?
Not that I'm aware of. I don't think so. That's why people came to me and said, I've been looking for something like this for 10 years. Wow, we have it here now. We're very happy to join. Sign me up. So maybe this is...
you may have started something.
I may have started a movement.
Yes, well, you may have started a movement. Oh, my goodness, this is great. Well, I'm glad I was a part of it in some small little way that I got to talk to you, and that it would be very, very nice for you to... of course, we're going to be talking with Rebecca, and perhaps, I think when you first said that, maybe you would bring some of your people, your neighbors with you, but I didn't think that was going to work because I thought you were so special and this is your book, but here you've made me drool with the first person, right? By the way, I have to say something to you, Rebecca. Did your mother have your beautiful blue eyes?
Yes, she did.
You have the most gorgeous blue eyes.
She once said it was her gift to me, and I've been trying to appreciate it ever since.
Your children have it?
Yes.
Oh, my goodness. So that's I'm looking at your husband, but I don't see his blue eyes.
Nope.
That's when he first saw you. He saw you and he fell in love with your blue eyes, right?
Actually, yes.
Yeah, but it was great. So, but your mother had that too.
Similar, yes.
And you said you have brothers and sisters?
My late brother, whose eyes were as blue as the sky, and I lost him at the age of 47.
But you only had one brother.
I only had one brother, so he doesn't know of any of this.
Right, and so but you have, do you have a lot of other family members who know what you're doing?
As a matter of fact, yes.
You said your son, of course.
Yes, my son, but my mother had a brother and a sister, and when we go to the Sosa Mendez Foundation, a gala, which of course is raising money to popularize his name in America. In Europe, he's very big as a righteous Gentile. I now have 3 cousins and their spouses who will join me, and they're my mother's siblings' children. So it is spreading in my own family.
Okay, so I don't want to run out of time before we do a little bit more on the silence. You know, I said to you before, and I did happen to see what you said when I was looking up your book. There are a lot of books called The Silence, which is really interesting. So it's not everyone can use the same name if they want. Apparently, right? We just have to put your name underneath
of it. You know, I always think of the silence of the lambs, the silence of this, So that's why you have to put in the silence and then my first and
Right.
last name, and it'll come up.
Yeah, because it is a very good name. It just yours. It was a perfect for you because it had so many silences in there.
That's right, including my own personal silence between my father and myself. And that was one
Yes.
of my motivation to write this, because this book is somewhat about the relationship between fathers and sons and the silences that often exist.
Oh yes, that is true, and I'm finding that more so as I grow older when you talk to people. But the most important thing is that actually it is. I know it's not a sci-fi, but it is historical. But also, there's a lot of, as you said, there's a lot of metaphysical. There's a paranormal.
There's paranormal. There's Jewish mysticism.
That's right, the mysticism.
But there's also a lot of history within the book, actual history that a lot of people have forgotten where they came from. If they came from Eastern Europe, a lot of people today, young people, they don't know anything about it.
Well, it's been wonderful talking with you, Monty. As usual, you're always an enlightening guest, and I know we'll be hearing more from you. Thank you.
You're welcome.